Most high capacity leaders assume that when their energy drops, the issue is motivation. They assume they just need to tighten things up, better routines, more discipline, maybe a little more willpower. But the pattern I keep seeing suggests something different. Most of the time, it's not a motivation problem, it's a recovery problem. And high capacity leaders are particularly vulnerable to this because they can compensate for a long time. They can carry more responsibility. They can function on less sleep. They can push through fatigue, which means they often don't notice recovery debt until the energy suddenly feels flat. And by then, they're already trying to fix the wrong problem. Just because you can carry something doesn't mean the way you're carrying it is sustainable. If we haven't met, I'm Chris Quintana. I'm a certified high performance coach. And this week, I'm thinking out loud about the fact that sometimes what we see as a motivation problem is really an energy problem. And here's the distinction that matters. Capacity answers the question, can I do this? Sustainability answers a different question. Can I keep doing this without eroding myself? High capacity people often answer the first question and skip the second. If they can carry it, they assume they should carry it. And that's where recovery quietly disappears. Because responsibility expands, but recovery structures usually don't. And that mismatch is where energy starts to flatten. Not dramatically, not all at once, just a quiet sense that something feels heavier than it used to. Let me give you an example. I had a client once who had been a one-person show for several years and was finally ready to bring on some employees. They were very excited because having a team would mean they would have more time to focus on strategic things and more time for life outside of work. Well, after a couple of months, they came and told me they were exhausted and couldn't figure out why. They were getting enough sleep, they still had all of their same rhythm in place, it had always worked before. They couldn't figure out why everything else felt so draining. When we looked closely, nothing about their capacity had changed. They were still capable, still sharp, still delivering, but their role had expanded. More decisions, more people depending on them, more cognitive load throughout the day. And yet, the recovery structures in their life hadn't changed at all. Same sleep patterns, same schedule, same constant accessibility. They had expanded their responsibility without expanding the systems that allowed their body and mind to recover from that responsibility. So the body did what the body does. It kept the ledger. And eventually, the bill showed up as low energy. This is something I've noticed repeatedly with leaders navigating expansion. We assume our body should simply adapt to the new level of responsibility, but physiology doesn't really work that way. Your body keeps that ledger. And if recovery doesn't match responsibility, the difference eventually shows up as fatigue. Not dramatic collapse, just a quiet flattening of energy. And when that happens, leadership starts to feel heavier than it should. Not because the role is too big, because the body is carrying a recovery debt the leader hasn't noticed yet. Now, when I say recovery structures, I'm not talking about spa days and vacations, although we all do love those. I'm talking about the specific, regular systems that allow your nervous system and body to process the load you're carrying. Let me be concrete about what these actually look like. Protected thinking time. Time when you're not producing, not managing, not performing, just processing, integrating, letting your mind work through what it needs to work through. For some people, that's a walk. For others, it's journaling. For others, it's sitting with coffee before the day starts. But it's protected, non-negotiable, not if I have time. White space in your calendar, not every hour booked, not back-to-back meetings or back-to-back clients, actual space between things. because cognitive recovery happens in transitions. If you never transition, you never recover. Physical movement that isn't about performance also helps. Not training for something, not optimizing, just moving your body in a way that discharges tension and recalibrates your nervous system. Walking, stretching, playing, movement without an agenda. Another one is emotional processing time. Time to actually feel what you're carrying instead of just managing through it. For some leaders, that's therapy. For some, it's a trusted friend. For some, it's just time alone to let things surface without immediately solving them. You also need connection time that isn't transactional. Time with people who know you, who you don't have to perform for, who remind you who you are outside of your work role. Not networking, not client dinners, just connection. And here's what I've noticed. When responsibility expands, these things I just listed are the first things that disappear. Not intentionally, not consciously, they just evaporate because there's more important work to do. But these aren't luxuries. They're the infrastructure that makes sustained high performance possible. Without them, you're running an operation on borrowed energy, and eventually your body's going to send you a bill. So let me ask you something. Which of these recovery structures used to be present in your life and are not anymore? Where did something disappear when you expanded? Did you used to have thinking time in the morning and now you're checking your email before you're even awake? Did you used to have white space in your calendar and now it's packed from the moment you start to the moment you stop? Did you used to move your body regularly and now it's been weeks since you did anything that wasn't strictly functional? Did you used to spend time processing with someone you trust and now you're just holding everything internally because there's no time? Here's what I want you to notice. It's not a discipline issue. It's a design issue. You didn't get lazy and you didn't lose motivation. You expanded responsibility without expanding the structures that allow you to recover from that responsibility. And your body is keeping track. Now, let me show you something more subtle. Sometimes the cost isn't physical workload. Sometimes it's emotional containment. Let me give you another example. I worked with a woman who was thrilled to be launching a new business. She mapped out a plan based on realistic hours and her priority of having time for her family. Then her husband's business took a little bit of a hit and he was feeling the pressure, and they spent a lot of time talking through it. She was helping brainstorm ideas and helping him manage things. And then one of her kids had a medical challenge, which took up both her time and energy, because obviously it's her kid. She's worried about him. That's emotional, right? That's emotional overhead. She almost didn't even notice how much she was supporting everyone else. On paper, her workload looked manageable, but her role had shifted. She had become the person everyone looked to when things were uncertain. The one holding the tone for the family. The one people came to when something felt unstable. And emotional containment is energy expenditure. Holding steady for everyone else requires recovery. But most leaders never think to recover from that kind of work. They just keep carrying it. I want to expand on this because I think it's one of the most overlooked energy drains for high capacity leaders. Emotional containment means you're absorbing uncertainty, stress, or reactivity so others don't have to. You're the calm one when everyone else is panicking. You're the steady one when the market shifts or a client leaves or a project falls apart. You're the one who holds space for other people's fear, frustration, or doubt without letting it destabilize the team. And that work is invisible. Nobody sees it. Nobody thanks you for it. It doesn't show up on a task list, but it's real work and it costs energy. Here's what that looks like in practice. You're in a meeting. Someone on your team is visibly anxious about a decision. You stay calm. You ask grounding questions. You help them see clearly. You just did emotional labor. Your business partner is spiraling about cash flow. You listen. You hold the long view. You remind them what's true. You stabilize them. You just spent energy. A client is upset. You absorb the frustration. You don't react. You stay present. You find the path forward. That's containment. Now multiply that by 10 interactions a day, 5 days a week, by months of being the steady one, and ask yourself, where's the recovery for that? Most leaders never even think about it because emotional containment doesn't feel like real work. It just feels like leadership, but your nervous system is tracking it. And if you're expending energy to hold space for everyone else's uncertainty, but never creating space to discharge your own, eventually you flatten. Not because you're weak, because your body kept the ledger and you never paid the bill. So here's a question worth sitting with. How much of your energy is going towards emotional containment? How often are you the stabilizer, the calm one, the person holding the center? And where's your recovery for that? Because if you're carrying emotional load for your team, your clients, your family, and you're not creating space to process and discharge what you're absorbing, that is not sustainable. It's compensation. And compensation always has a cost. At one point, my husband and I had both our martial arts studio and a car restoration business. Well, you know how they say 50% of small businesses fail? We lived that. While my business was taking off, while the studio was taking off, the car business was struggling. We were losing money. He was responsible for that business, and he was really feeling the weight of it. We didn't necessarily talk about the ins and outs of the business much, but I was giving a lot of mental overhead to problem solving. I was giving a lot of emotional overhead to encouraging, and we were both just always trying to figure out how to make things work. And I will admit, it wasn't until I realized that I was sort of delaying going home at the end of my day that I realized I wasn't giving myself enough space to recover, and that this energy drain was costing me a lot. I was going from my business to his business to sleep, and I realized there was nowhere in between to process anything. If I didn't get myself some downtime, some me time, I was really concerned we were going to start having problems, and I didn't want to see that happen. And so sometimes it's subtle. Sometimes it happens over a long period of time. Sometimes it sneaks up on us. But now I want to show you what it looks like when someone actually redesigns recovery alongside responsibility. So one of my clients opened a second location of his business a few years back. He knew that he was going to need more time commuting, because one of the, two places to go to. He was going to be juggling where his schedule more and which location he was at. He was going to have more time supporting teams. He was going to have more employees, which he knew meant was going to need more problems. He had stepped into a much larger leadership role, possibly more responsibility than he'd ever carried before. But instead of assuming that he needed to push harder, he redesigned his recovery. He protected thinking time, not as a luxury, as a leadership responsibility. He reduced unnecessary meetings, not because he was lazy, because his cognitive load had increased and his calendar hadn't adjusted. He treated sleep like a non-negotiable, not because someone told him to, because he knew his decision-making quality depended on it. And something interesting happened. His energy increased as his responsibility expanded. Not because the role was easier, because his recovery matched the load. So here's the reframe I want to offer you. When your energy drops, it's tempting to assume you just need more motivation. But the pattern I keep seeing suggests a different question. Not, how do I push harder? Instead, where has recovery quietly disappeared from the structure of your life? Now, let me show you the early warning signs. Because energy debt doesn't show up as a collapse first, it shows up as those subtle shifts that are easy to miss if you're not paying attention. Number one, you start waking up tired. Not occasionally, regularly. Even when you got enough sleep, you wake up feeling like you didn't rest. That's not a sleep problem, that's a recovery debt problem. Your body is trying to recover during sleep from a load it hasn't been allowed to process during the day. Decision making feels harder. Sign number two, decision making feels harder. Not because the decisions are more complex, but because the cognitive load of making them feels heavier. Where you used to be able to make calls quickly, clearly, confidently, now every decision feels like it requires more effort than it should. That's a signal. 3, you're more reactive. Whew, that's my signal. That's the one I usually notice. The other two happen, but that's the one I usually notice. Things that wouldn't have bothered you a few months ago now land differently. Someone asks a question and you feel annoyed. A small delay feels like a big problem. You're shorter with people than you mean to be. None of that's a character flaw. It's your nervous system telling you, I don't have the capacity to regulate right now. Number 4, you stop doing things that ground you. You used to read. You used to move your body. You used to have a morning routine, and now you don't. Not because you chose to stop, but because they quietly disappeared when time got tight. When you were having trouble with that sleep, and you kept waking up tired, and you just needed a few more minutes. That's not laziness. That's a design flaw. I lost track. I think we're on 5. You feel flat. Not sad, not anxious, not dramatic, just flat. Like the color has drained out of things. Like you're going through the motions, but nothing feels vibrant anymore. It's not depression, it's energy depletion. Your body doesn't have enough in reserve to generate vitality, so it's just maintaining. And here's the thing about these signals, they don't show up all at once. They show up gradually, one at a time, not always in order. And because high capacity people can compensate, they often don't notice until several of them are present. But if you're noticing even 1 or 2 of these patterns, that's worth paying attention to. Because your body is trying to tell you something. Not that you're weak, not that you can't handle your role, but that your recovery structures haven't kept pace with your responsibility. And that's the mismatch that's going to start costing you. So let me bring this back to the idea that ties everything together. It's an idea from last month's Clarity series. When success only works because you keep crossing your own values, it's not aligned and it's unsustainable by design. And here's how that shows up with energy. If your success requires you to override fatigue regularly, ignore your body's signals, function without recovery, push through when your system is asking for rest, then your success is compensation based, not sustainably based. And your body is keeping the ledger. You've already proven you can endure. You've already proven you can carry a lot. The question is, can you succeed without crossing your values? Can you expand responsibly and expand recovery time at the same time? I said that wrong. Can you expand responsibility? There we go. Can you expand responsibility and expand recovery at the same time? Can you build something that doesn't require you to ignore your body's signals just to keep it running? Because high capacity people can carry a lot, but carrying more without recovery, without more recovery. I'm tripping today, aren't I? Not tripping, but tripping over myself. Carrying more without recovering more Did I get it right? Carrying more without recovering more. Yes, this eventually flattens energy. One more time, I know I can get this right. Carrying more without recovering more eventually flattens energy. Not because you're weak, because your body is keeping the ledger. And if your energy has felt lower than it used to, it may not be a discipline issue or a motivation issue. It may simply be that your responsibility expanded faster than your recovery did. And that's something worth noticing early. Because when leaders recalibrate recovery at the same time they expand responsibility, energy returns, clarity returns, and leadership stops feeling heavier than it should. If your energy hasn't matched your ambition lately, and you're not sure whether it's a motivation issue or a design issue, that's one of the things we look at inside my alignment call. Not to add more to your plate, but to see where recovery has quietly disappeared and how to build it back without sacrificing what you're building. Because you don't need to push harder. You need to recover smarter. And there's a difference.